Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the ordinary meeting of Council, 26th of March. This meeting is being held on the traditional lands of the Wadawurrung people. We wish to acknowledge them as the traditional custodians and pay our respects to their elders, past and present. We extend that respect to all members of our community. We don't have any apologies this evening. Do we have any conflict of interest disclosures, councillors?
No.
Thank you. We have no leave of absence. We move to public question time. Just before we do, just to note for those who are watching or those in the gallery tonight, we are trying out a new system so that the councillors can actually see each other in our discussions and debate. So I hope you're all comfortable with it. The first public question comes from James Murphy. Is James present? No. Question is, I am James Murphy, Director of Sea All Dolphin Swims, the largest marine tourism operator in our region. For the past 9 years, we've become internationally recognised for our regenerative tourism initiatives, attracting over 50,000 visitors globally. This success has been supported by Tourism Geelong and the Bellarine, he calls it, which has helped us reach international markets and led to over 65% of our visitors coming from abroad. I'm concerned that the Borough of Queenscliff's potential separation from the Tourism Geelong and the Bellarine would negatively impact the region's businesses and the broader visitor economy. The continued success of our industry relies heavily on their marketing and advocacy efforts. Can you outline how the Borough of Queenscliff plans to provide greater benefits to the business community and residents using the $25,000 otherwise committed to Tourism Geelong and the Bellarine, should the separation occur? Additionally, how do you plan to continue representation in the media, state, federal programs and international trade events? And my response to James's question is that no decision has yet been made about our future arrangements with Tourism Greater Geelong and the Bellarine. So it's an ongoing discussion. Public question number 2 is from David Kenwood. David, thank you. The state government's plan for Victoria at map 15, Geelong in the future, reaffirms the Ballarine's distinct areas and landscapes, including protected settlement boundaries for all our region's towns and villages, and Geelong's new settlement areas to the west and north of the city. Map 4 Regional Local Government Area housing targets for the Barwon region sets a housing target for the Borough of Queenscliff of 400 dwellings. Can the Mayor and CEO provide an update, including a timeline, for the government-funded planning scheme amendment required for the 2023 Bellarine Peninsula Statement of Planning Policy to reincorporate it into the Queenscliff Planning Scheme, and provide some information about how the Borough, as the smallest local government area in Victoria, will be able to achieve the state's housing target by 2051. And I'll ask the CEO to respond, please.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, David, for the question. Look, I'll address your first question tonight, and I'll take the second part on notice because I think it deserves a bit better explanation. But certainly, with respect to the first part of the question around the Bellarine Statement of Planning Policy, we spoke to the department in the last fortnight, and their advice is that the regional office is still working, and the work continues in the Department of Transport and Planning on the planning scheme amendment to implement the Bellarine Peninsula Statement of Planning Policy into the relevant planning schemes. However, no specific timeline for the finalisation of the implementation was provided, unfortunately. So they're still working through it. I think I mentioned at the last meeting that the department itself has recognised that their attention has been towards Plan for Victoria and some of the other planning reforms. So they'll have some time now to get on with some of the other things that have been sitting.
Thank you. Public question 3 is from Elizabeth Atkinson. The preamble reads, as a permanent resident and ratepayer, I do not recall having been made aware of the online survey about the community vision and council plan. I found out about them by word of mouth. There are people in the community who may not have the social connections or internet access to become aware of council's process. I received my rate notices via email. I received a paper invoice for my dog registration despite having twice registered for the invoice to be emailed. Question. My question is to Councillor Rule. Why has Council not informed residents and ratepayers, whether via email or in writing, about the very important Community Vision Survey and the Council Plan process, including the time frame for providing input? I'll ask the CEO to respond to this as it's operational.
Thank you, Mayor, and through you, Elizabeth. Oh, there you are. So we have organised a mail drop to all residents and non-residential ratepayers, and so a hard copy flyer should be in your letterbox in the coming days. And that letter or the flyer will explain how you can participate and the different ways you can participate in the review of the community vision. So just for general information, we're using lots of different channels to make people aware of the review. You've probably not picked up on, but the first stage was through the Council Vision review promotion that was on social media and the Bellarine Times, and that's probably where the people have spoken to you about it. So for those who are interested or maybe have questions about the process or in the review itself, we're going to have a couple of drop-ins on April the 8th. So if you keep that date, and they'll be at the Queenscliff Hub, I think, McKenna, is that right? And then overall, we're inviting people to submit their submissions and undertake the survey up to about the 2nd of May this year. So there's a few weeks involved.
Thank you. And that is the community vision stage of our contact. There'll be similar things happening for the council plan. Public question 4 is from David Connolly. David, do you wish to? Okay. Initially, the borough was to find 800 new houses, despite having over 600 houses placed on the border at Mormack. We learned from the previous mayor, council had negotiated a reduced number of 120 new houses. We now have a revised target of new houses by 2051 of 400 houses and a stated canopy cover target of 30%. Council has previously raised lack of infrastructure such as kindergarten places. Can the CEO explain how the fourfold increase in the number of houses have now been targeted despite inundation levels, bushfire overlays, significant coastal Crown land, heritage and environmental overlays applying to preserve the urban character of the borough? In addition, what is the present canopy coverage? CEO?
Thank you, Mayor, and through you. And David, I'll answer your first question and take the second one on notice. So the last time I met with representatives from the Plan for Victoria team was on the 3rd of September last year. And that was to discuss the state government methodology for determining the number of houses, in particular the original figure of 800. So I also presented at that meeting vacant land data. I discussed the Bellarine Peninsula Statement of Planning Policy and other existing planning controls, and also put to them what a final housing figure might look like. And I had proposed between 120 and 200 houses as a more realistic figure and relayed that to the Mayor at the time. The Plan Victoria team did not contact me to discuss the final figure included in the Plan for Victoria document, so unfortunately I can't give you any further insights into the current methodology, except to note that the state government's been quite determined to make sure that each council took on some responsibility for meeting their targets. And as I said, I'll take the canopy coverage question on notice.
David, further question?
Well, this anyway, the new arrangements is, without being too political, there is a good book on Breaking Point, and the QCA did address matters in relation to sustainability, and targets are well and good, but sustainability of population increases are certainly ones to consider. So in essence, I should imagine that we also have a sustainability limit on population growth and population limits. And just in relation to, I suppose, sustainability, climate change, healthy country are all interacted into these particular elements, and I think they're important ones. And in relation to the canopy cover, 30%, if we've got a target, or if we've got canopy cover over 30% at present, does that mean chopping trees down to reach that target?
So is that your question?
Yes, it's just to clarify that
Thanks.
a target of 30% canopy cover is not going to reduce, if we're over 30%, it's not going to reduce our canopy cover.
No, certainly I'm not that brave, David, to start chopping down. But certainly it's an aspirational canopy coverage. And as you can imagine, it really, a lot of the plan is targeted at those new urban growth areas in Victoria, which don't have any canopy coverage. So I think, as you've already alluded to, we'll probably meet those 30% targets quite easily, but it won't mean that we'll reduce our canopy coverage. Yep.
Thank you. Public question 5 from the QCA. Do you want me to? Meetings attended by the CEO as per agenda lists at least 3 video conferences were held in March, but there's no reference to any of these in the CEO report in the agenda. This may be an oversight. Can the CEO detail what the agenda items were in relation to the video conferences and/or the nature or outcomes of the meetings for the benefit of the community and the council record? CEO?
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you for the question, David. It's not an oversight. I'm not sure that my day-to-day business is that interesting, but having said that, so that all the meetings that I do list in the table, and they're not all the meetings I do attend, obviously, they're in my capacity as a CEO in relation to council business. So they're things around state government reform and my other representative roles. The CEO report, which is distinct from that, captures the council activities, including, on occasion, the subject of the meeting they may have attended, that may be of interest to councillors in the community, and generally not covered with the quarterly reports in the annual plan. However, happy to come along to the next QCA meeting and talk about the role of the CEO and the types of meetings that I do attend in that role.
Thank you. Moving on to item 6, confirmation of the minutes of the previous meetings. The recommendation for the ordinary council meeting of 26th of February 2025 is that the minutes of the ordinary council meeting as distributed be confirmed as an accurate record. Do I have a mover for that? Thank you, Councillor Monaghan. Seconder, Councillor Tolhurst. All those in favour? Unanimous. Thank you. Similarly, the recommendation for 6.2 is that the confidential minutes of the ordinary council meeting on the 26th of February 2025 as distributed be confirmed as an accurate record. Do I have a mover? Thank you, Councillor Cameron. Seconder. Thank you, Councillor Tolhurst. All those in favour? Unanimous. Thank you. Item 7, the record of informal meetings of council laws. The recommendation is that the record of the informal meetings of councillors as presented in adjunct to item 7 be noted. Do I have a mover for that? Thank you, Councillor Cameron. A seconder? Thank you, Councillor Monaghan. All those in favour? Thank you, unanimous. Item 8.1, notice of motion status update. An update notice of motion under number 2024/593, preparing our borough for the summer and a productive 2025 is provided in an adjunct to 8.1 in this agenda, which might be of interest. 8.2 is notice of motion 2025/594, graffiti management policy for the borough of Queenscliff. Councillor Grigau?
Yes. This is 8.2, notice of motion that I raised last month. I, Councillor Grigau, intend to move the following motion: that Council 1 recognises that the borough of Queenscliff has historically had low levels of graffiti, but acknowledges that the need for this structured response due to rising incidences, particularly during peak tourist seasons. 2, reinforces Council's zero tolerance policy, zero tolerance approach to illegal graffiti, given its detrimental impact on the borough and its environmental heritage values and tourism appeal. 3, adopts the graffiti management policy attached to this notice of motion, commits that to the principles outlined in the policy, including mitigation, removal, enforcement and community collaboration to ensure a proactive and effective approach to managing graffiti. 4, acknowledges adequate financial resources to ensure that the policy is implemented effectively, which would include a timely removal of the graffiti from council-owned assets, a 2 businesses day response timeframe for standard removal request on council-owned managed properties, 2-hour response timeframe for the removal of offensive or obscene graffiti, receives quarterly reports on the policy effectiveness, ensuring it remains aligned with the community's expectations and best practices of graffiti management strategies.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder for the motion? Councillor Cameron? Thank you.
Mayor Rule, I wish to put forward an alternative motion.
All right. Thank you, Councillor Tolhurst.
I move that the policy as presented be put on a public exhibition for 28 days, and 2, specifically seek the input of Victoria Police on the policy during this period.
Do I have a seconder for the alternative motion? No. In that case, the motion's lapsed. Thank you, Councillor Tolhurst. Councillor Grigau, would you like to speak to your motion?
Yes, this motion was actually brought up to me over the last school holidays. It was quite important that we had as a particular incident that was quite visible of graffiti leading into the town. And it's always come to people's sort of call on council to do the removal of a graffiti. And it's very important that we all know, depending on where the graffiti is located, who's responsible legally to remove the graffiti. Now, the policy is not there just to say especially to protect the council and the public to fully know that, where we're going to end up and how to remove the graffiti. That graffiti was specifically on the RSL. Now, that is a private building. And, there were calls on why the council didn't act, and it took a lot of time. This policy and this guidance actually makes it very clear to the public and to council that whose responsible is to remove the graffiti. Now, I think it's a good policy that we can just bring to the community, and there's no arguments. It just makes it clear, and we do not get any sort of backlash within the community on saying, "Oh, why hasn't council acted fast enough to remove illegal graffiti?"
Councillor Grigau, do you wish to speak to the motion?
I support the motion that Councillor Gregor has put forward, knowing that we're coming into another holiday season, and unfortunately that's when we seem to see a lot of the graffiti that occur. And I think it's very important that people are aware whose responsibility it is to remove the graffiti, and it doesn't always keep getting thrown back, council, why haven't you done it? Graffiti is something that is a reactional occurrence. It's something that happens, we have to react, and we have to react quickly. So I think it's excellent that it's happened, but I also would like to make note that it is important that the police are always contacted when graffiti occurs in a rather timely manner to stop it from reoccurring around the town, as it often does. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cameron. Is there opposition?
Yes, you can count on me. I joke.
Thank you, Councillor Tolhurst.
I'd just like to say I have little opposition to a policy that seeks to formalise an approach and a proactive approach to a local issue like graffiti. And the policy here, I think, is a good start, but unfortunately it has not been discussed in any formal way with councillors. There's no clarity on how it was developed, what the best practice documents it referenced or drew on, or which stakeholders were included in its development. The policy makes no mention to a number of key local policies, state acts and response principles that should, I think, be considered in an integrated approach to graffiti management, including crime prevention through environmental design principles, the state government's own Graffiti Prevention Act 2007, which includes a provision to provide power for a council to enter a private property for the purposes of removing graffiti, council's public art policy. There's no mention of the role of police, no reference to the existing operational procedures that support our management of graffiti identification and removal. In foreshadowing the motion, it was said that the policy will focus on community engagement and collaborating with local stakeholders, including VicPol and property owners, yet those conversations and stakeholders are not visible in the policy before us. Greater clarity on some of the elements would also strengthen it. This, going to community consultation is a chance to strengthen a policy. For example, the removal of offensive or obscene material. How do we define that in the policy? And is 2 hours realistic for a small council with a limited budget? Without community consultation, I think this policy misses an opportunity to employ best practice policy development as described in the Local Government Act and in Council's own community engagement policy. I'd love to see this policy continued and it have really deep integration with our other policies and processes for community wellbeing and improved town amenity. And at the moment, this just falls short of being a policy that I think can really reflect community's expectation on graffiti. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Tolhurst. Does anybody else wish to speak to the motion or against?
Can I have a
Councillor Gregg.
Right of reply? Yeah, I actually had personal conversations and discussions and actually polled community members both within Queenscliff and Point Lonsdale. And I think it was it's an urgent call to get this policy done. Now there's a reference that, VicPol was a stakeholder, but they're actually an enforcement agency. So they actually don't need to really have a input on this policy. We've been lacking. There was serious incidents of actually very offensive graffiti that was occurred 4 years ago, or 3 to 4 years ago, and still we haven't developed a policy. That's why this policy was urgently put through, and there's a temporary, and then we can develop it further. It comes down to, I'm just taking the lead of the past council where they haven't gone to community consultation on several policies, so I don't see this as any different. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gregor. Is there any further debate? In that case, can I put the motion as expressed by Councillor Gregor? All those in favour? Against? 4 in favour, 1 against. Thank you very much.
Call for a division on this, please.
All right, a division. Those in favour? Councillors Gregor, Cameron, Monaghan and Rule. Those against? Councillor Tolhurst. Thank you. We now move to item 8.3, and I'm going to stand down and have the Deputy Mayor as the chair, and I'll be wearing my hat as the Planning and Heritage representative for this. I'll read my notice of motion. Heritage is consistently prioritised by the community in all consultation processes, highlighting the need, for me, for a formalised and strategic approach to museum support. Museums not only contribute to arts and culture, but also play a vital role in economic and community development. Representatives from our museums are seeking greater support and further investment from Council. Indeed, a coordinated approach to governance, advocacy and resource allocation will strengthen the sustainability and impact of these institutions within the borough. By establishing an advisory committee and embedding museum recognition within Council's strategic framework, the Borough of Queenscliff can ensure its cultural heritage is preserved, promoted and leveraged for community and economic benefit. I, Councillor Rule, intend to move the following motion.
Councillor Rule, I just realised, sorry, I have to declare a conflict of interest regarding this motion. I'm actually sit on the board of the Fort Queenscliff Heritage Museum, so I just realised that this would severely affect this motion, so I call leave on this.
Thanks, Councillor Rourke. You can continue.
I, Councillor Rule, intend to move the following motion. That Council, 1, recognises the Borough of Queenscliff's museums and their collections as key social and economic assets and acknowledges their significant contribution to the borough's heritage, arts, culture, community and economic development. 2, establishes an advisory committee by the end of April 2025 to oversee the integration of museums within the borough's strategic framework. This committee will prepare a statement of intent and outcomes, a vision. It will develop a collaborative museum destination strategy for the Borough of Queenscliff. It will define and recommend the role and function of Council as a partner in the implementation of the museum destination strategy. It will recommend the best approach to embed the Council's roles and functions in Council's strategic direction and operations. It will include representatives from key heritage organisations such as the museums in the borough, as well as individuals with expertise or interest selected via an expression of interest process. Will also be given administration support and a councillor member to guide its operations and alignment with council objectives.
Thank you, Councillor Rule. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Cameron, would like to speak to it?
If I can just make a comment here, more than anything else, you've got down that for the end of April to establish an advisory committee. It's now the end of March. We've got nearly 2 weeks of Easter when the museums are going to be very busy with lots of visitors. Should it be a little bit longer?
Oh, you know me, I like things done yesterday.
Okay.
All those in favour of Councillor Rule's motion?
Sorry, Councillor Monaghan, may I speak to the motion as well? Thank you.
Sorry, of course you can.
Thank you. I'd just like to acknowledge the motion is an opportunity to embed the work and the stories of our various museums and historical institutions in the borough into the work of council and enhance their collective offering to the local community and to visitors. It's an opportunity to streamline resources across the organisations and take a strategic approach to celebrating and supporting museums and work together in promotional and grant funding initiatives, including making submissions to Council's own budget process. So I happily support this motion and really look forward to working with the various members of our various museums and historical institutions across the borough.
Thank you, Councillor Tolhurst. All those in favour? Unanimous. Thank you. Back to you, Councillor Rule.
Thank you, Councillor Monaghan. Yes, thank you, Councillor Tolhurst. Moving on to 8.4, the notice of motion, number 2025-596, developing a consistent approach to urban design and public realm assets in the borough. Councillor Tolhurst.
Thank you, Mayor Rule. I'll simply read out the recommendation and then speak to it if there's a seconder. So the recommendation here is that Council note the importance of a consistent approach to urban design and public realm assets across the borough of Queenscliff that centres on and celebrates Queenscliff history and story, including its cultural heritage, acknowledges that a collaborative approach to urban design and public realm assets can reduce visual pollution, improve local storytelling, enhance access and safety for the public, and capitalise on community aspirations, establishes a fixed-term advisory committee via an expression of interest process that includes a councillor and council staff as members, develops the terms of reference for its operation, and makes recommendations to council on the principles that will guide development of a Borough of Queenscliff urban design and public asset framework, and concludes its work after 12 months. Requests that the CEO provide a report on any impacts the group's establishment has on the 2024-25 budget as part of the Q3 budget review, and appoints the advisory committee by May 31.
Thank you, Councillor Tolhurst. Do I have a seconder for the motion? Thank you, Councillor Cameron. Do you wish to speak to the motion, Councillor Tolhurst?
Can you answer a couple of questions regarding this motion? Can you describe what do you mean by urban design, and also the public realm assets?
Sure. The designing and planning of public spaces and assets that are in the public realm, be it seats, posts, lamps, etc., but the planning and layout of our community broadly.
So are you actually designing the furniture, or are you being a decorator? So you're decorating the... So there's a big difference between decoration and design. So you're saying you're urban designing, so you're more like being an urban decorator, like by choosing the furniture. So I think you have to be a little bit more specific.
Sure. Urban design, to my knowledge, is a widely accepted term. Perhaps there's a more technical definition we can draw on when setting out the EOI, but I am not decorating the borough, just to be clear, and encourage more respectful, I suppose, line of questioning in terms of dealing with the motions of various councillors.
But you said you're choosing things like furniture and, picnic furniture, seats, fence
Maybe
posts
we'll get Councillor Tolhurst to speak to the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Rule. I suppose in addition to what's cited in the motion and the preamble, this is about formalising an approach with community input for urban design and public realm assets in the borough. The motion and the establishment of advisory group seeks to acknowledge that place and story are really deeply intertwined. We heard this from meetings with various community groups, and it's a known reality that these things reflect one another and can do a great job of storytelling. And they have a really important role to play in telling a consistent and honest story, past, present and future, of the Borough of Queenscliff. The fixed-term nature of the group is about using local experience and in-house council expertise to set the foundations for important ongoing work, with the opportunity for the group to make a recommendation to council for its continuation if deemed necessary. It's about setting strong values and principles that inform the work, not jumping to specific outcomes without getting the groundwork right. So via the open EOI process, there's an opportunity for all interested community members to be involved or to submit an application to be involved. And the group will certainly benefit, I think, from having a diversity of skills and experiences at the table. And I look forward to hearing from my colleagues and seek their support for the motion before us tonight.
Thank you, Councillor Tolhurst. Councillor Cameron, did you wish to speak to the motion? Do we have any objections to the motion?
I'd like further questions regarding, so how many, what's the makeup, the numbers of the committee?
That's to be determined.
Who will determine those?
Through you, Mayor. So the process from here, I think, if it's adopted, is that I'll draft, as I've done previously, some expression of interest and some terms of reference for the councillors to consider and review before we go out to the community. So
Thank you, CEO Gill.
Thank you for the clarification.
Thank
Can I
you,
just add, I think
Councillor
it's reasonable to think about the feedback. It's a good question, Councillor Grigau, and to think about the feedback we've received on this matter and how that might influence the numbers we nominate. So I didn't want to necessarily put a number in there that would either limit or strain the organisation, and welcome the input of the CEO, the organisation, and a reflection on the conversations we've had with community about what a reasonable number is.
Thank you, Councillor Tolhurst. There being no further debate, can I put the motion? All those in favour? Unanimous. Thank you very much. Item 9, petitions and letters. Sorry, none
before
received.
we do move on, we just want to clarify who seconded that.
Petitions and joint letters, none have been received. Item 10, functions attended. There is a list there for your perusal. That recommendation is that the functions attended report be received. Can I have a mover for that, please? Thank you, Councillor Tolhurst. A seconder? Thank you, Councillor Monaghan. All those in favour? Unanimous. Thank you. Item 11, the Chief Executive Officer report for March 2025. CEO, is there anything that you'd like to highlight from your report?
Oh, thank you, and through you, Mayor. I think, as demonstrated tonight, there's going to be some keen interest in how the plan for Victoria rolls out, and hopefully the CEO report makes it clear that we understand that there's some work to do, and in particular around the housing numbers, and that we'll need to do some work with the community over the next 4 or 5 years as we start to understand what the implications are. Yep.
Thank you very much. The recommendation is that Council receives the Chief Executive Officer report for March 2025, that it notes that Council will consider the Coastal and Marine Management Plan at the ordinary meeting of Council in May 2025, supports the national federal election funding priorities identified by the Australian Local Government Association, and writes to the local federal members of Parliament, all known election candidates in local federal electorates, and the President of the ALGA, expressing support for their federal election funding priorities. Do I have a mover for that motion? Thank you, Councillor Grigau. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Monaghan. All those in favour? Oh, sorry. Question?
Question regarding the homes and stuff. Do you think we'll be able to give a guarantee or assurance for the people of the borough that will not be sort of putting homes on the old high school site? Or is there a push from the state government to actually try to access that site to put homes on?
Through you, Mayor, and thank you for the question, Councillor Grigau. There's certainly been no push at this stage, and the state government haven't approached me to discuss that site. I certainly, in 2051, I couldn't guarantee that the state government may decide that some councils aren't moving fast enough and therefore start to look at Crown land. But I think that the intent of Plan for Victoria is to make sure that we don't diminish canopy cover, we don't diminish public open space, and that there's other opportunities, including densification, that might help us meet those targets.
Thank you, CEO Gill. Are there any further questions? Yes, Councillor Tolhurst.
Just regarding the deferral of the CMMP for another 2 months, just if that would, if it's likely to have any bearing on our potential to apply for grants or to pursue other supports for implementing that plan, because there is quite a few laid out with lots of varied stakeholders. So does this particular addition of time have any bearing on that to your mind?
Look, I think yes would be the simple answer. However, I think that certainly our relationship with DECA and their participation in the development of the CMMP has helped us in terms of being able to have conversations about potential grants, but ultimately the grant bodies would like to see an adopted strategic document, yes.
Any further questions? I put the motion. All those in favour? Unanimous. Thank you. Item 12, Heritage Planning and Infrastructure. I note the various applications that have been made.
Well, just because of the people who've joined us tonight, it's probably worth, and Tim, I hope you don't mind me stepping on your toes here, that there's been some interest in a couple of items, one being the extension to the lawn cemetery in Point Lonsdale, and so Tim and his team are working with that interest, and the applicant there has been very helpful in addressing some of the concerns that have been raised by some of the locals. The other one of interest, I understand, is the pavilion in the Lower Citizens Park there, and just wanted to report to the councillors we've now received 5 objections, so that automatically means that you'll be briefed on that. So we'll organise a briefing for you in the next month or so on that particular planning permit application.
Thank you, CEO Gill. We'll certainly do that within a month. Thank you. The recommendation is that the planning permit activity report be received. Do I have a mover? Thank you, Councillor Tolhurst. Seconder? Thank you, Councillor Cameron. Does anyone wish to speak? Thank you, Councillor Tolhurst.
Just thank you, Mayor Rule. Just a question on the application for work on the pavilion. I don't have the application number right before me, but I suppose it's prompted my thinking about an element of our use of council facilities policy and around the directive in that, or the instruction in that, to do consultation and notification when council is approached by a potential interested group that wishes to use a council property. What does that usually look like? Are we relying on the planning process to make advertisement of that, or is there a deeper consultation that's expected to occur?
It's certainly with commercial arrangements, the expectation would be that you go out for an expression of interest to ensure that you get the best commercial outcome for council. So a recent example of that was the kiosk. With some of the other community facilities, it probably would depend on how much interest has been shown in a space. Certainly over the last 3 or 4 years, we've had lots of lobbying from the theatre group around use of a public asset in the borough, and this pavilion certainly emerged through that. We've done a bit of, before we've done the planning application, and before as we consider licence, we have spoken to some current users, so we've spent some time with the QMF and with the market to talk about whether or not there'd be any impacts on those particular groups, but we haven't gone for wider consultation at this point.
Has it occurred historically?
I think it has, yeah. And again, it depends on, for instance, the tenure and whether or not, council had a strategy for the pavilion around weddings, and so it dedicated some time to that, and that sort of didn't take off, and so it's sort of different things sort of occur with different things. Yeah.
Thank you, CEO Gill. Were there any further questions?
Yes, could we have any further updates regarding 18, the Esplanade Queenscliff? Is there still...
Jim, do you have a...
Only what's in the update provided, Councillor Grieger. So for 18 Esplanade, the applicant is reviewing the options for amended application to respond to issues raised by objections. So that's where it's at.
And any further progress on obtaining the original plans of the house?
I don't think I think my last conversation with Bryden was we did find some of the old building plans, and so he's reviewing those. Yep.
Oh, so you'll be able to provide it to us. Thank you.
Yep.
Any further questions regarding this activity report?
Just a very short note of gratitude from me for inserting a statement about the trigger for receiving a briefing at the beginning of this planning permit report. That's much appreciated, and I think a great way to signal how the process works with councillors. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Tolhurst. Are there any further questions? Well, I put the recommendation or motion. All those in favour? Unanimous. Thank you. Item 13 is the signing and sealing of documents, but there were no reports to consider. Item 14, questions without notice. No questions without notice are outstanding. Are there any questions without notice this evening? Thank you. I ask you to note the list of council meetings. Planning review meeting set aside for the 9th of April, ordinary meeting 30th of April. You'll note that they're different dates from usual because of Easter. And now I move to the closed session of the meeting. So I recommend that the recommendation is that in accordance with sections 66.1 and 66.2A of the Local Government Act 2020, the meeting be closed to members of the public, and you'll see the following items. Do I have a mover? Thank you, Councillor Tolhurst. Thank you, Councillor Cameron. All those in favour? Unanimous. Thank you.